That's something where if you don't know about something but you want to learn more about it, you go to Google.
Ian Rowlands and David Nicholas, research professors from University College London, define the Google generation or Generation Y as those born after 1993, a cohort of young people with little or no recollection of life before the web. No matter where you go, there's a good chance that someone within your line of sight is connected. This is the culture into which the Google generation is being socialized, where information is quite literally at their fingertips. The traditional idea of search has been reduced to the click of a button. Rick Anderson of the University of Nevada offered public information services that only a few years ago required dedicated buildings, expensive collections of books, and a full-time professional staff, are now provided on a free self-serve basis 24 hours a day in the homes of those who need them.
Students once looked through piles of hard literature to find the perfect content for their work. Today, it has become the norm to gather research from one outlet, Google. David V. Lorchter, president of the American Association of School Librarians, discusses the implications of this drastic shift in the way students are now conducting their research. He states search engines such as Google are so easy and immediate that many young people, faced with a research assignment, just Google their way through the internet rather than struggle through the hoops of a more traditional library environment.
Nicholas Carr, a published author and media industries enthusiast, has questioned whether or not Google is making us stupid. He writes, "The arrival of Gutenberg's printing press in the 15th century set off another round of gnashing." The Italian humanist Hieronymo Squarcifico worried that easy availability of books would lead to intellectual laziness, making men less studious and weakening their minds. Carr also points out that New York University's Professor Clay Shirky said most of the arguments made against the printing press were correct, even prescient. But again, the doomsayers were unable to imagine the myriad blessings that the printed word would deliver.
Rick Anderson of the University of Nevada studied the ways that Google is outperforming the traditional library. He specifically looked at the things that Google is doing well that the traditional libraries have done poorly. The first is service on demand. He states, Google and the internet in general give users information when they need it and without requiring them to travel to get it. Libraries traditionally have offered information only when librarians were willing to give it, during business and some evening hours, and only where they were willing to give it, within the confines of the library building. A library that closes at midnight every night and opens at 8 o'clock the next morning is down for fully 4 months out of every year. Not even the least reliable online database comes anywhere near that level of patron disservice. His second point is service at the article level. Google provides a highly granular level of service. Because it searches the full text of online documents, it provides access to individual articles and pages. Libraries generally provide access at the title level. They catalog journals and books, not articles and chapters.
It is unquestionable the impact that the internet has had on our ability to perform just about any task. What we fail to consider, however, is the pervasiveness of these new media technologies. If we consider the information that a single Google search provides, it is not hard to believe that Google has a good idea of who you are, where you live, what you eat, and even where you vacation. The more you share, the more they know. As Google's executive chairman Eric Schmidt has put it, with your permission, you give us more information about you, your friends, and we can improve the quality of our searches. We don't need you to type at all. We know where you are, we know where you've been, and we can more or less guess what you're thinking about.
I would argue that implanting things in your brain is beyond the creepy line.
Mine in particular.
Yes, at least for the moment, until the technology gets better.
From the printing press to our current digital environment, boundaries and privacy began to blur. Lee Shaker, a mass and political communications scholar from Portland University, writes, In its free-to-the-public form, Google is totally dependent on providing a critical mass of users to advertisers. Since Google traffics in public information, the audience must believe that the company serves up better information than competitors and protect users' interests. Put simply, to draw the audience necessary to flourish, Google must cultivate the public's trust. He goes on to say that reading Google's privacy policy makes it clear that it is a document to protect the company's interests first, to reassure users second, and to protect users lastly.
It's not to say that we're unaware of this invasion of privacy, most of us are. It's that we don't care, or it becomes overlooked because this is what we know. David Terrace, a professor of communication studies at Mount Royal University, who holds the Ralph Klein Chair in Media Studies, refers to the Google generation as digital natives, and explains that when they do consume news, they prefer to have snacks as opposed to meals. Being short snippets of information, we want fast information, we only know fast information, and we are blissfully, with conscious minds, unaware of its total consequences.
I have Google on my phone now, and it's ruining our lives. I don't know if you've noticed, it's ruining life because we know everything. But we're not a lick smarter for it. We just know. You don't know something? Wait 2 seconds. You will know.
Janet Morahan, professor and chair of applied psychology at Bryant University, suggests that there is a relationship between internet dependence and loneliness. Whether dependence causes loneliness or loneliness causes dependence is yet to be determined. Users become more interested and invest more time in online rather than real-life situations. This concept of new technology creating loneliness is explained further in Sherry Turkle's TED Talk, Alone Together.
Some of the things we do now with our devices are things that only a few years ago we would have found odd or disturbing, but they've quickly come to seem familiar.
A 2010 study by the British Library and JISC into student information seeking and using behavior identified a number of skill gaps exhibited by the Google generation. This study specifically explores the implications of students coming through health and medical schools. Dr. Hannah Spring of York St. John's University has outlined their findings. The first skill gap is search skills. The root cause of this problem is that whilst the Google generation has vast amounts of information at their fingertips, they do not have a clear understanding of how it got there in the first place. This is mostly because for them it has simply always been there. The second skill gap is using information. The research has also found a tendency towards horizontal searching or shallow searching with skim reading of its items found, rather than vertical or deeper searching methods that involved a deeper engagement with the material being viewed. The last skill gap identified was evaluation of information. The Google generation has replaced thinking with clicking, and consequently, the capacity to sift, discard, and judge is lost. Students do not spend appropriate amounts of time considering the accuracy, relevancy, and authority of the information sources they are using.
Tara Brabazon from Charles Sturt University in Australia defines the Google effect as the flattening of expertise. She states that the concern is not within the banality of information. There has always been a plurality of sources in the analog environment. The concern is in the lack of literacy skills and strategies to sort the trash from the relevant.
Our dependence on Google to give us reliable and relevant information has become second nature. Furthermore, Betsy Sparrow and her colleagues at the American Association for Advancement of Science found that the internet has become a primary form of external or transactive memory, where information is stored collectively outside ourselves. They looked at 4 studies which suggest that when faced with difficult questions, people are primed to think about computers, and that when people expect to have future access to information, they have lower rates of recall of the information itself and enhanced recall instead for where to access it. They continue by saying, it may be no more than nostalgia at this point, however, to wish we were less dependent on our gadgets. We have become dependent on them to the same degree that we are dependent on all the knowledge we gain from our friends and coworkers, and lose if they are out of touch.
Google can be used as a very powerful tool. Google's accessibility has resulted in the ability to obtain useful and important research, not just instantly, but also independently. The Google generation has been exposed to this mode of searching for so long that it has become normalized. This normalization has created a dependence that cannot be broken.
The Google generation is willing to look past the breach of privacy because they simply depend on Google's instant responses. This tremendous reliance depicts just how much the Google generation feels they need this outlet to function. They see the benefits outweighing the costs. For them, although the cost of privacy is immense, the need for answers instantly and to feel connected is even greater.
The deinstitutionalization of search has drastically transformed our lives. It has changed the way we access and store information. We have no way of knowing the impact that this will have on the Google generation as they navigate their lives online. There is no denying that Google is a powerful tool. However, you must always remember to search at your own risk. As Google's own Eric Schmidt puts it,
if you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Something in the water.